So in our previous examples, what we did was we used a void method to do work. That's absolutely positively valuable. It means that we were able to create a single purpose method, something that did, you know, work, a function. It completed a task for our greater program as a whole, but it really did it inside only of that very method call, and it didn't return anything back to main. So that's really a one-way street. The street we're using is from main to a function, and then usually out to the output window over on the right-hand side, if we're using Replit. Here in 5.4, we're going to return a value. So that means that from wherever it is that we have called to our method, so let's say inside of main, okay, that we are expecting to potentially pass parameters as arguments over to a method. That method is going to do some work. It's going to sum them. It's going to multiply them together. It's going to concatenate, take a last name and a first name and put them together and make name, whatever the case might be. And when it's done, we expect something back. So that's the return value. So we have used that already when we've looked at to upper or to lower, right? So you put a string in there with uppercase and lowercase letters. So camel case, capital E in Eric, capital W in Wolf. And we used to lower, and we got back a reference to a string. So we got back, because remember, strings are immutable. We can't change it, but we can make another one with the result that we want. So instead of capital E and capital W, I get all lowercase letters back. That's a return value, something that came back to, in this case, main from where it was called, and we got the benefit of the result there. Now, there's a couple of changes we have to make, and this is on 5.4 on 294. There are a couple of changes that we have to make in order for that to happen. Java has to know when you define your function that there is an expected return here. So instead of public static void, we are going to have public static and then whatever it is that we're returning. So here, this is 294. This is what a returning, or a method rather, with a return would look like. So here we have public static, and then int here can be double, it can be string, it can be character, so a char, whatever it is that we are using. So this is the definition of what the return type is. So if you are returning a double, this would be public static double sum. If you were returning, in this case, it's an integer for sum, we would return public static int sum. So the other wrinkle we can see here that we're adding in this chapter is if you look at the arguments, so the things it is that sum is expecting two arguments this time around, right? So the only difference here is we have to put the comma in between them. Now, how many arguments can you accept? You will find no upper bounds for what we will do. So you don't have to worry about that inside of the scope of this class. And I will actually tell you that that's something that you'll explore in 241 if you take advanced Java. So there is no upper bound for you as a developer, practically speaking here. And there's really no reason why you would say, take 1,000,000 integers here. We would use a different kind of a data set in order to do that later on, or we would use a file instead in order to do that. So you don't have to worry about what the upper limit is for the arguments that you can accept in a method. So you can see as we return here, or as I'm reading, continue on here, we are accepting two arguments, an integer and an integer, and we call them num1 and num2. And then here inside of our method, what we're saying is we need a result. We need an integer to hold that. So we're just going to add those together. And we've got result equals num1 plus num2. So basic math so far, I think everybody's okay with that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return that result. So what we're saying is, wait. Before you terminate this particular method, just make sure that this value goes back someplace. So, and actually we can see that if we scroll down just a little bit here. Here we go. This is code listing 5-9. This is on 295, so the very next page for those of you with a physical copy of the book. Line number 14 is where that return value gets used. In line number 14, what we're saying is here inside of main, it is main. You can see that here is on line number 7. Here inside of main, what we're saying is take the result of calling to our method called sum, take the result of that, which we pass value 1 and value 2, take the result and store that back into our variable called total. And then we can use the result of that someplace here. So we are going to see examples of calling to methods that return values. It is, one of the great uses of method-based programming like this is you get a result back. You get an answer from a function, and you can actually go ahead and use that. So remember that these things have to line up. So here, your method, so this, again, I'm just flipping back here to 295. It's just an expression here. Your method has to expect parameters, potentially, and the number of, or it has to accept arguments, rather. And the number of parameters that we send has to be the same as the arguments that we're expecting. So that's one portion of this. The other portion of this is we have to include here in our function our method definition. So that's right here. We have to include what the return type is. So remember that void does not return anything, but if I want to return an integer sum, it has to be int sum. If I want to return a double sum, it has to be called double. If I have to return a character, it has to be character. If it's a string, it's a string. But the return type has to be matched inside of that method definition, and it works really well. You'll get the hang of it pretty quickly.